It has been decided of which two teams are going to make it to the 37th Ball Bowl. That and more this time on Sports Hour. What is up, guys? Alexander Thomas here. Welcome back to this. This is going to be the Sports Hour of the Ball Bowl this year. It is West Carolina Huskies, who are 16-0. And the Carolina Panthers, who are 15-1. Carolina Panthers' only loss came from the Lynx, who beat them in the last year's Ball Bowl. So it came down to this. It's going to be actually a very interesting position. So we're going to have to see how it's going off this one. We're going to talk about each one of these, how it's going to work for this year. Move down, please. So we are going to be suing a little bit off of this one. I lost the thing. And I know in this one we didn't have the full thing, but for the full intro thing, but for this one it is kind of not, doesn't make sense to do that. Let's see, we got so here we go. We got the two teams that are playing in this year's. We have the Huskies and the Panthers. The Huskies are the number 1 seed, and the Panthers are the number 2 seed in the NBL. The number 1 seed got beaten by the Giants in the first round. Not that one. We're going to talk about the World Playoffs, and we're also going to talk about the actual way what this is going to be in this year's games. If you look at the divisions, the Panthers 15-1. The only loss they had was against the Lynx. I don't recall which week it was. Let's think. I think it was week 10. It was, I believe, a game of a week, if I remember correctly. Make it easier. Find the Panthers. Let's see. I close in that week. It was so in this week they lost by 1. And that time it was they were 5-1 each. So at this point, it was actually a very interesting season going up to that point because the Lynx were actually much better. And the Lynx actually did not make the playoffs. So it was a bit of a situation. The Lynx actually did not make the playoffs. The Lynx actually missed the playoffs by 2 ranks because they had to make it into the playoffs. They had to be in the top 8. Unfortunately, did not make it to that point. They actually went 8, which is not terrible, but unfortunately, it wasn't enough for them to get in the playoffs. Let's take a look back at the divisions for the playoffs. Who did each of these teams have to beat going into this point? Panthers went 3-1 in the first round when against the Panthers. It wasn't even close in the match. I can go and get rid of that now. It wasn't even close. If you look at the total sum what the Pirates actually got was 158. Panthers got almost 3 times that. It wasn't idiots. I think honestly the Pirates are just not we're not a team that actually work with it. Pirates at that point were pretty bad in offense. They were good in defense, but not good enough to actually put in a position. It wasn't exactly a great position at that point. They were 9-7. They weren't one of those really good teams. They had to beat that. They would have had to beat the Panthers, and unfortunately, it wasn't a situation for them to do that. Then the Panthers faced off against the Giants in the second round because the Giants had the lowest seed. While these games were a lot closer, it was still 222 to about 323. So it still was not a close game in any of these games. First 2 games were a little bit closer than the second ones. Unfortunately, the last game did take it into a position, and that was on Monday, where the Panthers were able to beat the Giants. Giants was probably not a hard team. They put up a good fight, I will say, in the first 2 games. It didn't take long, though, for them to kind of get washed out in Game 3. Panthers then had to face off against the Knights in the last series, and it actually was the Panthers when I could up these things sometime 3-1. Panthers actually could have won the game, won in the first 3 games of the series, but they had a hard time in the end in Game 2, where they ended up losing 163 to 161. All the other games were ridiculously close. Every one of those games was actually close. 463 versus 459, so it was like a 4-point difference the entire thing. Then the Knights didn't win, but they got pretty close in every one of these games to actually win the games. They almost won every one of those games. The Knights were in control pretty much with that 4th game, but they weren't able to finish it off. So that is how the Panthers had to go into the playoffs. The Panthers are going to be the second seed, so they are going to be the away team through this position. And I did point out in the conference team I did say 3-2. I wasn't too far off. I also gave the Packers the win here. Obviously, it wasn't even close. Let's look what happened with the Huskies. Huskies were unstoppable pretty much for the entire season. No losses. They were second in offense only to the Panthers. They weren't great in defense, but there was one thing that they had that no other team had: the lack of penalties. I never really went over the penalties. The Huskies had the third least number of penalties in NBL history. There's only two teams that had less penalties than them. Panthers had it in 1 year. They ended up having 8 penalties. The Huskies had 11 in that year, this year. And the only other team that had lower amount of penalties than them was, in fact, the Tigers. The Tigers actually had a year where they had 7 penalties in the entire year. That was several years ago. It was before actually we started doing the NBL series live. It was 2014 when they did that. They only did 7 penalties that entire year, which is impressive defense. Honestly, even then, 11 penalties is ridiculous. Panthers only had 22 penalties this year, so it wasn't outrageous. The only difference is they had a lot better of a team at that whole time. Huskies had to face off against the Techs in round 1. That wasn't even close. The total was 126 to 220. So nope, not 220. 308. They almost tripled out the score. I mean, allowing only the second game was a lot closer and final game in third overtime. Unfortunately, it didn't make a difference. Huskies were winning in everyone. And Huskies are the only team in NBL history that had 25 straight wins, including playoff wins. Their last loss when they were called Westville, which was last year, in their very last game of the season. They were not able to win that one. They had to beat the Techs. Now, honestly, the Techs were just not the team to worry. I mean, Techs at this point were kind of lame. Honestly, they just did not deserve to be in the playoffs. They had one of the worst offense. They had decent defense, but honestly, it would have been better off to go and send a team like the Lynx to go to the playoffs instead, because they had a little bit better outline at that point. But that they did go ahead and beat them. It was not even close. It was 3-0. Now, grant, the second game was a lot closer. The Techs were able to come back a little bit in that game. Unfortunately, it didn't make a difference. When they had to go and face off in the second round against I lost where it was. In the second round, they faced off against the Otters. Otters couldn't do it. This is the division round. They just couldn't do it. They were eliminated after all of it. Now, funny enough, this last game was put up into second overtime. The Otters, however, couldn't score in the second overtime, and it turned out to go to after the third possession of overtime. The Huskies were already leading by too much. So they were eliminated at that point. Then the Packers were able to beat the Lily Cats. So that ended up making it so that they went to play against Packers. Packers tried their hardest to win. They were unable to do so. Huskies still stayed undefeated and won every game for 25 years. Now they're going to face off against the Panthers. This is going to be an interesting battle because they're going to be playing at NBL Stadium, a stadium that Panthers aren't normally playing at. Panthers normally play at Bank of America Stadium, which is not too far away from here. Quite literally, it's outside. So it's going to be interesting. Now, if we looked at the divisional matchups, for that one, the Panthers have for first and second. The Huskies are not too far behind in the scoring, but they're not great in defense, and this might be what kind of goes into the position. I have to really look at this one and say that this is going to be a very, very difficult matchup. Now, my prediction here is going to be a little bit more different because of the context of the win. I definitely do not think the Huskies are going to be able to beat the Panthers out 3-0. Unfortunately, it does not going to happen. My prediction. And there was no update or prediction in this last week. There's not one this week either. It comes down to a lot of things. The Huskies are in a position where they are really good. I can see them beating the Panthers. The same thing I said last year when the Lynx and the Panthers played. However, I did think the Panthers were going to win that one. I'm actually going to say the Huskies look like they're a better team right now to me. I don't think they're going to win 3-0. I don't think they're going to win 3-1. I think they're going to win 3-2. I think they're going to win 3-2. It's going to come down to all the games. If the Panthers somehow win every game to this point, it's going to be a very interesting battle for this one. The first game is on 6/22 so it's 2 days from now at 1 o'clock. That's p.m. And the next one then will be at 10 o'clock a.m. Then it'll be at 9 o'clock a.m. on Monday. The other 2 games will be determined depending on if it's even needed. I suppose I'm thinking it's definitely gonna have to happen considering last season and they had to go to Game 5. I see no reason why this game is not going to go to Game 5. All right. Now we've finished talking about the divisional matchups between these 2 teams. We get to talk about the World Playoffs. And this is actually going to be an interesting game because we actually have already regained all the determinations on who's in the positions for the World Playoffs. Actually, going to get the other one up now. It's NBL scores. It's not NBL scores. So these are the teams that should, in theory, make the playoffs. However, it's not quite that easy. This actually is a Z. However, it's not quite that easy. These teams, unfortunately, it goes to the top 16 teams. So if these are the top 16 teams, doesn't matter what their positions were, these are the top 16 teams at that point. So even though the Chargers made the playoffs, they did not make it to the playoffs. And then we'll have to actually look at the division around it as well. Let me go and put these over here. So this is the order. Unfortunately, not everything's determined. The 16th seed, unfortunately, is going to be the Tex. There's seed 16. 16. The 16th seed is the Tex. And I honestly do not think that the 16th that they even deserve to make it into this point because they were just got demolished. And honestly, I think it would be better to send someone like one of these teams here, honestly. Techs just basically make the playoffs on the context that they had a better ending at the end. So the 16th seed goes into that position. They had 13 points. They're going to face off against. We don't actually know who the first seed is, so this is actually a question mark, and we don't know who the second seed is. It's going to be one of these two teams. That's all we know. We know whoever wins the Ball Bowl is going to be the first seed, and whoever loses the Ball Bowl is going to be the second seed. So we'll know everything else, pretty much. The Giants are the 15th seed. So, I don't know. This seems kind of sad. The others we won't need to see it are the 14th seed. We can go and put 14 there. They actually are going to be updating the dates because they're not actually correct right now. The Colts are the 13th seed. The Lynx are the 12th seed. And we'll put in the records. I just needed to mark that the where they are. The Pirates, for God's sake, the Pirates are the 11th seed. The Dogs are the 10th seed. They definitely deserve it. They tried their hardest. The Supermen are the 9th seed. The Packers, which honestly is going to be an interesting game, are the 8th seed. The Browns are the 7th seed. The Tigers are the 6th seed. Yeah, it's going to be an absolute elimination. The 5th seed, Indians. Believe it or not, the Indians are the 5th seed. The only teams that get into it are the top 4. So they are the 5th seed. The top 4 are different depending on how they seeded, how they did it differently. So the top 4 teams actually has something to do with if they made it to this round or not. The Dogs and Knights both made it in, so the Knights actually made it farther, so they're going to get to be it's going to be the Knights won 3 games to 1, and then the New England Cats didn't make it, won 3 games to 1. The difference is going to be the score. That decides there, because it's a little different how everything works out. So the Leland Cats got 456 points. The Dogs didn't get that far. No, wait, that's the Giants. The Dogs got 402, so the Leland Cats are going to get the higher seed. Normally they get the 4th seed, but because the way it works in these 4 teams, the Leland Cats and the Knights made it that far. So the Knights and Knights are actually fighting for the 3rd and 4th seeds. The Knights did better, so the Leland Cats did a little better, so they're going to actually get the 3rd seed. Is that fair? Not really. It just comes down to the fact that it just happened to be how it works. And as for this team, we don't know which two of these 2 teams are going to make it, or actually what positions those teams are going to be in. So we know that the Huskies and the Panthers are going to be the 2 seeds that back, are going to be the number 1 and number 2 seeds. We don't know what the order is. Let's go and take a look at what they have on the record-wise. I can go ahead and close this down, I believe. Yeah, we already know which teams are in there. So record-wise, I don't think you're seeing both. Okay, I just updated all those things. Let me go back to the host team. There we go. So here's how the World Playoffs work. I apologize for that. Here's how it works. You guys are only seeing this one. I'm actually seeing a different screen on my end. So first off, we look at the record for each of the teams. The Techs are the number one, or were the last seed that made it in. The Techs end up with a 9-6-1 record, which there are ties. So, I'm actually gonna go ahead and change this, please. Over here. Tags are 9-6-1. We don't need to actually need to. We just need to put that. Second team, which is the 15th, which ended up being the 15th seed, was the Giants. The Giants actually did way better in context. No, they didn't. They actually ended up going 8-7-1. Which is actually worse than the Tech's 19th, but they're the 15th seed. So that's the way it works. It doesn't necessarily go in order. Then we have the next team, which is the 14th. No, with the 14th seed. 14th seed. Let's see. We had the 14th seed here. Which are the Otters. The Otters did actually a lot better than they probably. They're not exactly given a fair record. Honestly, in my opinion, compared to where they're actually succeeded, they've got a pretty tough matchup, though. I will say this. Let's see. The 13th seed, which is the Colts, actually ended up with the same record. (11-5). The Superman, I'm just gonna put them in the order I see them. We don't know we don't know for sure about who's gonna get into facing off against the Techs, who's gonna go against Lexington. We know one of these two teams over here is going to be doing it. I'm just gonna go put their records down. Panthers are 15-1, and the Huskies are 16. And we don't know who it is, but we do know that one of the two is going to be it. moving on. All right, we got the Packers ended up with a 12-4 record. So a pretty interesting matchup there for who we're facing off against. The Supermen ended up with a 9-6-1. So 9-6-1. The Indians, we already knew they went 16-0, even though they did not exactly get the credit they deserve. I honestly don't know. Then the Lynx went 8-8. The Knights went almost the exact same record as the better team here. 11-4-1. They made it to the finals. So the Tigers didn't make it that far. They went 13-3. Pirates, who don't deserve any of this, 9-7. Leland Cats, 12-3-1. And remember, all of these are single matches, so it's single elimination in this format because you don't get you don't get to play 5 games. It's you win or you lose. It's that simple. Let's see, the Browns, who honestly probably are the one team that don't deserve any of this because they're 10-6. They end up winning their division. That's it. The Dogs were the better team in the end. 12-3-1. All right. So these are the teams, and we don't know who's actually facing off. This is what most of those matches are going to be. I will let you know that these dates are absolutely wrong. I think they're about 2 weeks off. Can you give those dates, please? We'll get this credited. So the first games, the first day is on the 29th. So it's a week. So everything's a week ahead. Yep. So basically, the way we've put it up, it's actually a week ahead. So that's 2nd, so that would be 29th. This 23rd would be the 30th. It's the times are correct. That's the only thing I can say. Is updating the times. They're 1 week ahead. What was a week ahead? 29th. That's correct. And these are happening at different stadiums. I don't even know the stadiums are necessarily. I do know what stadiums there are. They're actually listed, I believe. Yes, I gotta tell you what those stadiums are here. Because the stadiums are exactly what they say. Does it say what stadiums? No, they don't even. They don't know. They don't know the stadiums yet. They're gonna tell me. They're gonna go and tell me. Yay! They're at these. They're at these stadiums. Yeah. So all the games that happen for the Eastern Division are going to be at NBL Stadium. I suppose Stadium on part over there, but the Charles Stadium. I swear I spelled stadium wrong. I most certainly did. Fairchild Stadium is where the Western Division will head. And the YMCA Stadium, that is where the Southern Division is taking place. And these are all different stadiums from. Alright, so those are the stadiums. Now, let's talk about the teams' matchups. I can't really say much about these because I don't know them well enough. They were matched up literally in order, so I don't know them too well in that regard. But I could talk about the NBL, which will be playing NBL Stadium. But I think that's going to end up being probably more of another video than once the matchup gets real. I'm honestly going to say these are all single matchups, so it's single elimination. And I will point out that they're not necessarily in order from context news. Seed 1 is playing seed 16, seed 2 can play 15. They go in whoever had the better by seed. So it's a little bit more difficult. So it might be a little different. So the winner of this game here will face off here. So there is going to be a little bit of a difference. I don't know the actual order necessarily of any of these teams, but that's basically the idea. I'm going to go ahead and say right now, if I was going to eliminate, just to say who I think it's going to be the Packers. Packers win game 1. I think the Indians just had a hard time. They're going to have a hard time this one too, but I think they're going to win, but by a little bit. The Knights are going to beat the Colts. I'm going to say the Tigers beat the Packers because of the way the Parrots did not do well. I'm going to say the Oilers beat the Luna Cats. They were able to beat them before. I think the Dogs beat the Browns. And I think it's still going to be the number 1 seeds. Those are going to be interesting for the World Playoffs. We'll find out next week who the final games are for those teams. I'll see you guys in the next video. The World Playoffs has been decided. So, or the 37th Ball Bowl has been decided, and so it'll be interesting to see who wins the Ball Bowl this year.